Smell that? That's the smell of history. Yeah, like the sort of like the rubbery, the burning. Yeah. We love to laugh, we love to cry, we love to dance, sing. These things that make us human. But where do they all come from? Egypt, Greece, Rome. 3 civilizations. They all have one thing in common: satire. A very important pastime and cultural, social, even sometimes political ritual in these societies, which was incredibly important and just integral to their growth. Right here is the very spot where satire was born.
No.
What?
We talked about this. It's not here, it's over there.
Oh, great. Okay, well, so we have to redo that whole thing?
Yes, we have to redo the whole thing. I thought you knew what you were doing.
Oh, I didn't. Look, I go where
it's
you
over
guys
there.
tell me to go.
Just go over there.
All right, jeez. We do the whole thing again, or what?
No, just pick up from what you were doing.
Okay.
It's right there.
Right here is the birthplace of satire. You can even sometimes see the footprints of our ancestors who created this great tradition, one that echoes through the ages. Now, come with me as we travel back in time and witness the beginning, the ends, the transformations of this fantastic and wonderful art.
"4,000 years ago, a man in ancient Egypt sent his son to scribe school. He told him, 'Son, you have to become a scribe because scribes are better than any other profession in our culture.'
But Daddy, I don't want to become a scribe.
Son, if you don't become a scribe, you might become a barber. And a barber is pathetic. He shaves people. That's disgusting."
I guess you're right, Daddy.
I know I'm right, son. Scribes were considered to be superior in ancient Egypt, and thus the satire of the trades. Right here, next to the Nile, in ancient Egypt, thrived one of the greatest civilizations ever to thrive, next to the Nile, in ancient Egypt. Now, with any civilization of this size, there are social classes and social divisions. These social classes and divisions bring on a healthy dose of competition. And what better way to resolve this competition than to have a healthy dose of mockery, mocking each other. This mockery came first by the scribes, recorded in the Satire of the Trades some 4,000 years ago. And thus, out of the sand dunes of ancient Egypt emerged the newest form of entertainment: being a total dick to everyone you don't like. Although the ancient Egyptians finally fell to their knees in the intergalactic space battle against the alien. Although the ancient Egyptians finally fell to their knees because of social and economic differences and challenges brought on by an alien invasion, the ancient Egyptian civilization fell, but satire lived on.
Welcome to ancient Greece. The year is 670 BCE. The place, the bustling agora, one of the birthplaces of satire. Now we have to realize that satire today is not satire back then. They didn't call it that. They called it iambic verses or invectives. And one of the most prevalent writers of the day was a man named Archilochus. These early Greek iambic verses written by people like Archilochus were used to attack certain individuals, make them feel bad and sad about themselves, would ridicule them. Archilochus was believed to have magical powers because his iambic verses were incantations, were so powerful that they could even lead people to suicide. And it led satire to becoming this great transformative force. Archilochus' satires had an emphasis on hatred, punishment, and abuse. And they were also used for justice, moral mission, and punishing vice, punishing those who had done wrong with his biting verses. An example is as follows. Once there was a man named Lycambes. He offered the hand of his daughter for marriage to Archilochus. Shockingly, he backed out of this agreement. Archilochus, ridden with rage, attacked, abused Lycambes with his words, and soon after, Lycambes and all of his daughters had committed suicide. Early Greek satire was characterized by the poet who, out of a desire for hate and revenge, writes iambics against his enemy.
After Archilochus came a man named Aristophanes. Now this playwright was a little different than Archilochus. One of the major differences was now Old Comedy, which is the period in which Aristophanes worked in, was mainly based off of phallic ritual. At phallic rituals and other ceremonies like those, the leader of the songs or the leader of the festival would bark abuse at a member of the audience.
Hey! You there, peasant! You're stupid and fat!
Now this member of the audience might have done something like not give a big enough donation, or maybe no donation at all, or maybe they didn't provide any food to the members of the party there. Well, Aristophanes jumped right onto that bandwagon and began his satirical career. Aristophanes considered himself a moral and political reformer. However, despite this fact, none of his plays could be taken too seriously. None of his works had any practical effect on the social and political life of his audience.
This guy's really funny, but his comedy has no effect on my social or political status. None whatsoever. No, not at all.
This was in part due to the fact that there were only 2 major satirical performances a year. Therefore, Aristophanes could not be as topical as he wanted to be. Thus, he focused on more general topics that lasted in the audience's eyes for over longer periods of time.
This comedy isn't topical at all. This was from 6 months ago.
It's still funny! These 2 major performances were not only a time for Aristophanes, but for the audience themselves to break away from societal constraints and really delve into the idea of freedom of speech.
Our last stop is Rome. Now, due to budget constraints, we couldn't actually get to Rome, but all roads lead to Rome, so technically if you just followed that way for like a couple thousand miles, you'd get there. And that's the closest we could get, or that's what my producers say, so I'm sorry, but you can talk to them. The Romans, obsessed with everything Greek, built upon the satirical traditions of their past. There were many pioneers of satire, one of which was Juvenal. And Juvenal, unlike other writers of satire at the time, focused more on stories and tableau to tell his messages as opposed to dialogues and monologues. Juvenal drew inspiration from the world around him. And I quote, "Think of him standing on a street corner, watching the depraved world go by, scribbling furiously." Building off the traditional Greek style, Juvenal added an aspect of physical comedy to his verbal abuse.
It's funny!
Many of his satires focus on mocking the, quote, perverse aspects of contemporary entertainment and their negative impact on Roman culture. Just look at satires 1, 6, and 10. He viewed himself as a writer who went against the ideas of those who came before him, and that he strayed from the norm, but he was critical of himself for doing this. Roman satire's critical strategy was making fun of yourself and your art and genre, and blame the failures of your art on the conditions in Rome at the time. For Juvenal, shows and festivities were a microcosm of what Rome was actually like. All he had to do to gather inspiration for his satires was head over to the games and look around.
The seats of the theater, amphitheater, and circus were perfect for providing rich cliches of Roman social types.
Another Roman playwright was Horace, whose domain was not large gathering places, but small gathering places like barber shops.
Horace lived from 65 to 8 BCE, and after being reduced to poverty when his estate was forfeited, he turned to verse. His writing was infused with a rare happiness. It was still mocking and pessimistic, but not as much as his predecessors and those that followed him. Keyword, amused. He wasn't pissed off by his surroundings and the conditions in Rome. Rather, he was able to find the humor in things.
Satire, the invincible art form. No other type of human expression has existed and thrived for so long, withstanding war, famine, alien invasion, and economic crisis. Once introduced in ancient Egypt, humankind has developed this fascination, this obsession. It quickly became the most significant way for a civilization to illustrate its woes or anxieties. The writer of satirical verse became extremely powerful. Their words, having such an effect on other citizens, are seen as magical incantations, used for punishment and as a weapon. Soon, satire goes political. As the culture of Greece evolves, satire paints a picture of people's strife against the government, against the state of the empire. This also happens in Rome, with the addition of people-based satire, comedy from a cliché like the cliché superfan, which Horace illustrates in his 9th Satire. All of Rome's comedy is a mockery of its stereotypes. As the sun sets on our journey through time and through satire, we have to ask ourselves 2 questions. 1. Just how did the aliens use their superior technology to help build the pyramids? And 2. How does satire affect people? Why do we like it so much? Where does this fascination stem from? How many rhetorical questions can I ask? The answer? From our ancestors. These extremely advanced civilizations which had victories and losses, and had trouble and golden ages, all needed one thing: a good laugh.